Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And I think this week we have a bit of a long episode.
I think you're absolutely right.
Because you got a long script going on, I got a long script going on, we got a long going on.
Last night we were doing our scripts and we're like, I'm not done yet. I'm not even very close to done yet, and it's already pretty late. Robin does work really early, so we're like, this feels like a Thursday episode kind of week. So it's January. You know what that means. I'll get to that in a second. So we figured, let's bring it. Let's have 2 really long scripts. See how long we can make the episode. It's like it's an XL-sized episode.
Sounds hot.
Pretty excited about that. But like I just alluded to, it's January, so you know what that means. January Patreon push.
Also, shout out to all of our new patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for making Adam believe that January Patreon push works.
No, I believe it. It's that I get to prove it to Robin, because all of you out there, you're down with JPP. Yeah, you know me.
Oh my God.
Probably the lamest joke I've ever said. Please don't delete your donations. I would appreciate that. But yeah, it's been really amazing to see patrons signing up for different levels, tiers that work for you.
I know some people are doing it because Adam messed up.
We had people come into the Discord and be like, hey, I signed up to prevent physical abuse from happening to you. I understand that there was some sort of issue that happened with the mail. They called it #Stampgate. So the scandal is official, and I appreciate your support in that. So, anyways, just want to say, if you like the show and you would like to support us, we would sincerely appreciate that. It can be as low as $4 a month. And you can go over to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. We have a bunch of different levels that start at $1 due. They come out once a month, which is super quick, takes care of it, helps us keep the show going, helps us, buy new equipment when need be. Like we needed some sound padding from the walls to improve the echo situation that we have going on in the new recording studio. We got some. They're not cheap, but they're not the expensive ones. But I think they're doing okay so far. And we have some stuff that we're building out in the office as well. Things like that are made possible by the fact that we have folks that do support us over there on Patreon. And we sincerely appreciate every single one of you. So it's been really, really awesome to see that people are actually tuning in and going over to Patreon and signing up. We also have another dog bed. It's actually a dog bed that we used to have in a different room that our puppy, our little Anya's laying on right now. So if you're barking or growling, that's how she communicates to us to tell us it's time to go to bed. So you never know. A few of those showed up in last week's episode. Some might show up in this week's episode. Either way, sincerely, thank you to everyone that's signed up so far. Thank you to everyone that's going to sign up for January Patreon push. It's been pretty cool. It's one of my favorite things to do all year. It makes January really fun. So yeah, just want to say thank you one more time. But like Robin said, we have what's going to be most likely a long episode coming up for you guys. But before we jump into it, man, Robin, how have you been?
Good. Nothing different. Nothing new. It's the same as last week.
We had a 4-day weekend, though, which was pretty nice.
Lots of sleep.
We had some sleep, finally. Thank God. There's a lot of stuff to do around the house. We had a day where we're like, let's unpack as much as we can. We knocked out the number box. We knocked down the number boxes pretty far. Did some good work there and realized some of the stuff that we can do to get fully settled into this place, which was definitely productive. And then we had a day where we're like, it'd be great. Let's sleep in. Let's make breakfast. Let's just chill out. Just take a long nap. Chill out some more. Watch TV. And we actually just got to hang out together and do nothing for the first time in what seems like over a year. I swear, man.
Yeah.
So,
and whoever ordered a bunch of I Want to Believe mugs, if you guys are listening to the podcast, thank you so much.
Yeah, seriously. Also, I want to give a shout out to Captain Fake Eye and her husband, Ben, because they sent us a really sweet housewarming gift.
Oh my
They did not need to send. It's one of the nicest cutting boards I've ever seen, and it says Scaryish on it. It came to our door. I was just like, what is this? I pulled it out. I was like, oh my God, this is so sweet. And I had a note from them. It was just incredibly nice. And I just want to say thank you so much, because it's just something y'all didn't have to do. And it just made us feel so happy. And I don't know, it just really kind of brought the house together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So it's been a nice last week or so. I think that thing actually came in a couple weeks ago, but still. But yeah, I wanted to kind of give us a little time to talk about how we're doing and normal stuff, because we're going to get into some fucked up shit this episode.
Oh my God. Yeah, Adam was telling me that his was pretty rough, and then I was just like, mine is fucking disgusting. So if you guys are, triggered by violence, gore, things like that, maybe this is not the episode for you.
I'll definitely give a couple of trigger warnings. My script doesn't go too far in depth, in detail when it comes to some of these things, but it's definitely like content
This
warning for
this
sure.
is a true crime episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so-
And this, I mean, all of our episodes are always marked explicit because we do swear. This one is definitely explicit. We could go the entire episode without swearing and it would still get that tag.
Oh my gosh. There's
there's
one
some stuff.
episode that we got demonetized on, which
It was Jeffrey Dahmer, right?
No, it was the Russian killer.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which okay, it happens, but damn, that's how like crazy.
That's how you know. Like,
I'm hoping this episode is not that bad. But
if
we'll
it gets
see.
demonetized, I'm gonna blame you because I think I have mine at the level where it won't be demonetized, but it accurately depicts the horror of what happens. So,
all right.
That said, I think I'm going first. So if I wasn't going first, I'm just going to go first anyways. So for this week, I knew I wanted to cover true crime. Like for JPP, for January Patreon push so far, we've done like real world scary when I covered sports injuries. We've done like mystery. We've done cursed and haunted locations, really giving a good gamut of sort of what we cover here on Scaryish for anyone who might be new for this particular January. And this week just felt like it was true crime week to me. It's like, this is the week that we should just get down to brass tacks and cover some real world shit. So Robin's also on that bandwagon, like we mentioned, and we're heading for the horizon. I don't know if that's a saying, but now it is. You're welcome, folks. So this topic was actually suggested to us by a friend of the show and previous guest, Rhett. So if you folks remember when Rhett was on the show, that was pretty awesome. He sat down with us, did a really, really good interview. Shout out to Rhett. He also suggested this particular topic I'm about to cover, so I appreciate that. And yes, this is a topic about murder with a very bizarre twist. So let's get into it. And spooky friends, I present to you the Amazon Review Serial Killer. So I'm not sure about the structure I'm going to make this topic because I usually just have it go in chronological progression. Like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And I try and get as like progressively detailed as I need to be. But I may get a little bit freeform with it along the way. I have it written out, and I knew I was going to write it out a little bit differently than normal, but just bear with me. I kind of do some things with this particular script.
All
Nothing
right.
exciting, but I think you'll get what I'm doing. I will, however, start at the beginning, and we'll see how things go when we get to the crimes later in this person's life. So on March 7th, 1971, a man was born by the name of Peter Sarsgaard. And if you're thinking that name sounds familiar, it's because Peter Sarsgaard is the actor who plays the DA in the new Batman movie, the bad guy in Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, Alan from the movie Jarhead. He's a fairly famous actor that's often mistaken as being one of the Skarsgårds, like Stellan and his kids, Bill and Alexander. He's not. He's Sarsgaard. It's different.
Okay.
And if you're like, okay, that's weird. No, he's not the killer, but he does share a birthday with him. So when I Googled that date, he's the guy that came up, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. No way. It wasn't him. So one Todd Christopher Sampsell was born on that day as well. And no, he would not turn out to be an actor. He would turn out to be a fucking monster.
So cool that yours is a monster, mine's is a monster. It's going to be a monster episode.
Cool.
Monster.
Cool. That's a word you just said like 5 times. This particular monster's parents got divorced when he was 2-year-old. So he definitely had some sadness in his heart to start out growing up. But lots of folks have their parents divorced when they're young and they don't wind up being like this dude. So that's really no excuse. Shortly after the divorce of his parents, his mother married one Carl Kohlhepp. Carl would become Todd's legal stepfather as of 1976 when he was 5 years old, and Todd's last name would be changed to match that of his stepfather. During his childhood, Todd's childhood, he basically discovered anger and latched onto it as his primary motivator for all of his behavior.
Okay.
What kind of behavior, you ask? Well, you know, the normal stuff that 5-year-olds would do, like pouring Clorox into a goldfish's bowl to make sure he could kill it. He shot a dog with a BB gun.
What the?
He got kicked out of the Boy Scouts for being too, quote, disruptive.
I'm sure he just wanted to make all the other kids do the stuff he was into, and the kids were like, nah, dog.
What the fuck is wrong with this kid?
Yeah. That is awful.
When he got to school and it came to stuff like projects or school dioramas, he was punished while he was there for destroying his classmates' projects with a fucking hammer. Side note, as much as this is definitely a red flag, it's a shame because it's also fucking like metal as fuck. Like you go into school like, oh, that's a nice recreation of the Battle of Gettysburg. Do you mind if I make it a bit more realistic? And then you just smash the fuck out of the thing, leaving it just a broken wasteland of army men. You're like, there, I fixed it, Dustin. Fuck you. I'll take my Psych Eval now. Totally worth it.
What Dustin in your life just...
I was literally
you.
trying to think of
I'm like,
who didn't I like when it came to
Oh
elementary
my
school?
God.
I didn't like Dustin. He stole shit.
Okay.
That's right. If you're listening, fuck you.
growing up, I never had the urge to break anyone else's
I didn't
dioramas.
either, but when I read that, I was just like, yeah, I could have done that kid
Oh
shit.
my God.
I would have done it and then been punished for it.
You've
But
smashed mailboxes, right?
yeah.
So
yeah.
I could see you wanting to
I had
smash
a single
someone's...
night where my friends and I were bored. We're like, what should we do? And someone was like, you want to smash mailbox? I was like, I've never done that. And they're like, me neither. And I was like, all right, fine. All right, fuck. Okay, I got to tell this story now.
God.
This is a tangent. I'll try and make it quick. So this is a true story. I was like 19, I think. This night, it was me, my brother, and two friends who I will leave nameless. We'll call them Lemmy and Ditchard.
What the
So
fuck? No!
Lemmy and Ditchard are in the back seat, and they're like, hey, like, what should we do tonight? And my brother's driving. We're just like, I don't know, man. Like, what do you guys want to do? And we're just all bullshitting about places we could go, things we could do. And someone, I don't remember who in the back seat, was just like, have you ever smashed a mailbox? I was like, no, I haven't. They're like, we should do that. Like, I want to know what that's like. So we're like, all right, fuck it. Let's go do that. And so we went to a few people's houses that we didn't like. And we smashed their mailbox. But it was also like negative 10 degrees outside.
Was one of them Dustin?
No, Dustin's not a part of this story. One of them was like my high school Dustin. So I won't talk about where I acquired this thing from, but I had a pretty big lead pipe with a really large nut on the back of it in my trunk just for self-defense.
Oh my God.
So I took that out of my trunk. And then when we went to this person's house, I hit their mailbox, which was plastic, and it was very, very cold. So it just exploded into all these shards. And we were just like, oh shit, that was so cool. So a few mailboxes fell that night. And then I was like, hey, like we should go pull a prank on one of our friends. So we picked this chick I knew, and I was just like, let's go destroy her mailbox. Like, she'll be pissed. If she's really mad about it, I'll replace it. So we go to her house. I hit the mailbox. It's like shaped like a house. I thought it was going to be wooden and it was going to explode.
God.
I know this is terrible. Statute of limitations. I'm pretty sure it's up on this. So I hit the thing, and it's made of metal. And it's just like, thwoom, so it dents. So I just kept hitting it until I basically turned the top of it into like a V.
Oh my God.
So no mail could go in this thing. It's a federal crime. Don't do this. So that was the end of the night. We're like, okay, we got it out of our system. We had a night where we finally smashed mailboxes. We don't have to do this ever again. Let's never talk about it. Sorry, guys. And then we went home. So then, of course, like about 2 or 3 weeks rolls by, and that friend, that chick, like is talking to me. And I'm like, so how have you been lately? And she's like...
Did she burst out crying?
She's like, I haven't been great. I'm like, what happened? She's like, oh, our house got vandalized. I'm like, oh, fuck, what happened? At this point, I have forgotten. I'm the person who technically vandalized the house. I forgot that I smashed that mailbox. And she's like, well, here's the thing. Like, my mom, when she was growing up, like, she had this picture of this perfect house that she wanted. And, like, we've never been able to get it. Like, our family, like, kind of runs on fumes.
Is the mailbox
So my dad
perfect
designed
house?
the house into a mailbox and gave it to her. And she was like, this is enough for me. Like, I have everything I need. And this is just, like, the most special gift I could ever imagine. And, her, like, dream home was their mailbox. And she's like, and then someone just destroyed it. And as I'm listening to him, it's like, oh my God. I'm like, it was me. And she's just like, I knew it. And I'm just like, how the fuck did you know? She's like, because every time something happens to something that's sentimental from our friends, it's you that destroyed it. I'll tell you a pumpkin story on a different episode.
God.
But yeah.
Oh my God.
So anyways, that's my tangent story for this episode.
Why?
Don't smash mailboxes. It's so fucking stupid.
Why is anyone friends with you?
I still don't know.
God,
I don't
you
know.
are horrible. Okay, anyway, continuing on with this horrible, horrible murder.
Anyways, this kid who's a real piece of shit, not me. So this kid's doing all this shit. He's killing goldfish, shooting dogs with a BB gun, which is just a fucking dick move. And he's smashing up classmates' shit with a hammer. He's very young. So at the age of 9, his temper is so explosive and violent, he becomes kind of known for it, and he's also quote unquote preoccupied with sexual content.
So he's into porn.
Not just like kind of into porn, like it's all he wants to watch.
Okay.
So it's obviously starting to get to a point where like things are a little bit weird. He winds up in a mental institution at the age of 9 for evaluation because they're like, there is something off about Todd. Turns out, after they talk to Todd, he's been bullied pretty significantly and beaten by his grandfather during the majority of his childhood.
Wow.
So when he was staying with his stepfather, he actually did like his stepfather, but things were not going great because he was left a lot of time with this grandfather who was abusive. At one point, his grandfather actually electrocuted him with a cattle prod. I put this side note in here before I knew I was going to tell that story, but side note, as a person who grew up in the Midwest, I was a kid there, grew up there until I was 26, almost say is, get in line, pal. I've been electrocuted with a fucking cattle prod multiple times. Maybe that explains me smashing the mailbox.
I don't know if I want to raise my children in the Midwest ever. Like,
you've been very clear about the fact that you do not. So
that's just
my grandfather never beat me, either of them, though. So that does suck. At one point, Todd wanted to go live with his biological father in Arizona. So he tells his mom and his stepdad, hey, I want to go live with my bio dad. And they're like, all right, fine, go ahead. So his bio dad teaches him things that are important life skills that a kid needs to know, like how to blow things up and how to make bombs. So that's going well. He's having a good time with his bio dad, but his bio dad's always out with the ladies. He's going on dates and shit, and Todd's left alone. He feels neglected. So at some point, he rings up his mom and stepdad and says, like, hey, bring me back, because they live between South Carolina and Georgia, from what I understand. His mom and his stepfather are like, no, we can't. We have to do stuff. And they tell him no. And they keep giving him excuses why they can't bring him back from living with his bio dad. And they basically put it off for as long as possible because it's one of those things where, like, they know that Todd's a handful and they just can't fucking deal with him. Eventually, though, he does make his way back into the custody of his mother and his stepfather. When he gets back there, he is all sorts of violent. His sexual tendencies have only gotten worse. He winds up going back to live with his stepdad. It sounds like he gets bounced around, with his bio dad. He gets bounced around quite a bit. While he's in Arizona with his dad, he just gets worse and worse and worse, basically. And knowing what his proclivities are at this point in his life, it's kind of a sign where this is going to go next. So when Todd is 15 years old, he kidnaps his 14-year-old neighbor. He forces her to come to his home where he then ties her up. And I'll go ahead and do a trigger warning right now. Ties her up, tapes her mouth, and sexually assaults her. After this, he walks her home, and he tells her that if she tells anyone, he will kill her younger siblings. So trying to keep her silenced through fear. She gets home, and she absolutely tells on him.
Good.
So she says, like, this is just what happened. He's threatening to kill my younger siblings. And so the authorities get involved. Todd gets arrested for what he did. They perform many psych evaluations on Todd after this, and were quite disturbed with what Todd exhibited during these evaluations. It takes around 1.5 to 2 years for everything that they go through. I think it's 25 months, actually, for like all these evaluations, custody, his trial, and all that shit. The judge does make it a point to note that Todd was, quote, very bright and should be advanced academically. His IQ was measured at 118. Which above 120 is genius level. So 118 is the 88.5th percentile, or as Asian parents would call it, unacceptable.
Oh my God.
So they did also note that he was not academically advanced, even though he should be, and was instead, quote, behaviorally and emotionally dangerous. This is the judge. When his trial was concluded after 25 months, the judge said, quote, 25 months of the most intensive and expensive professional intervention, short of God's, will provide no protection for the public and no rehabilitation of this juvenile, end quote.
So there's no help for him.
They're like, he basically comes out and says, without straight up saying it, like, this kid is a turd in desperate need of being flushed. But instead, we'll find a bowl for him to float in. So at 17 years old, Todd Kohlhepp was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the crime he committed, and just the sort of horrible person he was evaluated as being during those 25 months, because he basically showed zero fucking remorse for the crime he committed.
Jesus.
He served out the entirety of that sentence, too. A lot of times you hear, like, oh, they got out in like half the time or 3/4 of the time for good behavior. No, every fucking day of that 14-year sentence was served by Todd in jail. He's released in 2001 when he was 31 years old, over half of his life. And the first 31 years of it was spent in a federal penitentiary. There's a phrase I've heard in a movie. I'm pretty sure it's the movie Righteous Kill, which is not that very good of a movie. But there's this awful criminal who's in court, and because of some clerical error, he's allowed to go free. You know, basically, like, evidence wasn't handled the right way. He wasn't read his Miranda rights, whatever. This shit actually happened in real life. In that scene in the movie, the judge tells the defense attorney, I release your client unto the world. And I remember hearing that, like, ugh, fuck. Like, that is a real foreboding tone. Like, the judge is saying, like, we all know he's guilty. We all know he's awful. and he's free to go. You know, and I think that that's the sense that people had, the feeling people had in 2001 when Todd Kohlhepp was let out of prison. It's like, I'm sure he'll be back here very soon.
So why didn't people just keep an eye on him constantly?
Well, like, what are you going to do? You're going to spy on a private citizen who's already paid his debt to society? Like, even though the judge says there's no rehabilitating him, he got the maximum sentence that was allowed to give him at that point, which was 14 years. He serves it out. He gets out of there. He leaves Arizona. He goes back to South Carolina, and he starts his life there. Most folks there don't know about his past, although he is a registered sex offender, and he has to go and introduce himself to everyone like, hi, my name is Todd. I'm a fucking pedo.
But he's not.
I mean, he's a registered sex offender. He has to do that. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't do it. I don't have confirmation from his neighbors.
No. It's like he's not a pedo. He's just he's like.
Well, I mean, he raped a 14-year-old girl when he was 15. So, you know, it is what it is. He's a fucking monster. Let's move on from that. So when he settles in South Carolina, he's a pretty decent citizen after that. Over 10 to 15 years, he gets a few speeding tickets and one violation of rolling a stop sign. That is his entirety of run-ins with the law up to a specific point. He obtains his real estate license on June 30th, 2006. I did check. You do have to apply for that and state that you were a felon or you had a felony charge on your record. And he did lie about that on his paperwork to obtain it. And he doesn't just settle with being a real estate agent at that point. He forms his own company and he employs 10 other real estate agents aside from himself. And he's this dude that people are just like, okay, he's type A. He's, you know, big, bold personality.
What?
He has a sense of humor that would be described as dark, which is annoying for someone like me with a dark sense of humor. It's like he's ruining it for the rest of us.
Okay.
His website for the real estate company had some dark humor on it that some folks found inappropriate. So it's like a red flag, but not a huge red flag.
You can't put that on your real estate.
So in the about
website
thing where it's like how they had the website built, it's written by him, quote, "We went out and got professional graphic designers, web developers, specialists in marketing in a variety of fields and gave them a job. Then we threatened not to feed them if it didn't work. It's amazing the motivation you can get after day 3. End quote.
My God.
So like people could read that and be like, oh yeah, that's funny, a little bit weird and like inappropriate, but hey, that's just Todd. Funny, but a bit weird because yeah, he was a weird guy. And it all depends on who you asked what kind of a guy Todd was. Some customers described Todd as extremely outgoing and professional. That was not an uncommon thing to hear about him. Another customer said he liked to talk about his guns a lot and use sexual innuendos all the time, and it made them uncomfortable. One of the employees' assistants, one of the people that worked for Todd, had an assistant, and that assistant said Todd was always angry and condescending towards the employees he did not like. Starting to sound like bad bosses that I fucking had, you know? One employee said he watched porn all the time, even at work.
So
again,
his obsession did not...
Sexual obsession is still there. And he's watching porn at work, again, ruining it for the rest of us. What the fuck, Todd? I'm kidding. I work from home. One of the more...
Damn it.
One of the more bright red flags of his red flags in his adult life came from his time spent at a Waffle House. I'd like to point out that although the food may be delicious, it isn't. Nothing good happens at a Waffle House
Never been,
at all.
I don't know.
I've been there one time. I can't remember. I was very drunk. It was either a Waffle House or some place that was just called Awful House. That was like a knockoff version. It's actually a Jim Gaffigan joke I stole. So Todd's no exception to that rule of nothing good happens at a Waffle House. He was such an asshole and such a creep, even for a Waffle House, that all the waitresses requested he not be allowed in the restaurant. They're like, he's too much. We don't like waiting on him. And the end result is that whenever he does come in, because he does have money, the male cook in the back had to leave his station where he's making food, come to the front, take his order so that none of the waitresses had to do it. And then he would also be the person that brought Todd his food.
That is insane.
So it's just like he was a disruptive force at that Waffle House. But although he's a creep, he's not evil to these people. He's just Todd, right? Like, I mean, there are evil people out there, especially like at that time, like things are happening in South Carolina that are considered like the acts of evil people. Like take this story, for instance, November 6, 2003 in Chesney, South Carolina. 4 individuals at a Superbike motorsports store. At the time, one man named Noel is on his way to the shop. He's talking to his friend. His friend's name is Scott. He says, hey man, I'll be there in a little bit. Hangs up. Scott's the owner of this place. Scott's there. Scott's mom is there. She's a bookkeeper. A mechanic is there named Chris. And the service manager named Brian is there. Scott's 31. Brian's 29. Chris is 26. All incredibly young people. And Scott's mom is 52. They're all there. Noelle shows up like, cool, I'm going to go see my friends. Walks in. They're all fucking dead. They were shot to death and left in the store. A sketch does wind up getting released of a person who was seen near the shop at a time the murders could have taken place. No one's taken into custody, 0 leads, and it just becomes a cold case. There's a bunch of articles still up that have not been updated on this particular cold case. Just talking about all the different things it could have been.
It's no longer a cold case.
No, it's not. And people were like, man, you know what? I bet you even though there's this sketch of this dude, which I'll post on our Instagram, it was probably gang violence because those gangs are so bad and they have all that shady activity happening. You never know where those people in gangs are coming from. You know, the evil people, they're probably the ones that did it. And for a long time, that's the narrative, is that this unsolved mass murder of 4 people in this store was the result of gang violence. I mean, what's Todd compared to those people? Those are the evil people. He's just Todd. Even one of the waitresses at a local Waffle House has an article written about her. I mean, the Waffle House he's so familiar with has a waitress who winds up going to jail with her boyfriend. They were con men. Like, geez Louise, they spend some time in jail. And then, you know, he's going to this Waffle House. All of a sudden, he's going to have to find a different waitress to be creepy with. Like, first the gang murders, now this Waffle House waitress. Side note, I'm obviously doing a thing here, so don't get mad at me for victim blaming. I'm portraying the things that are seen in the local media at this time. Those 2 folks get out of jail after that short stint, and then they go missing. They just disappear, leave behind their daughter. Say, you know what, guys, we found some place, we're going to make some cash. And then they never come back. Like, geez Louise, some people, right? Poor fucking Todd. His Waffle House is down a waitress. And Todd has this big-ass property. It's 95 acres. This guy has a lot on his mind. He has to take care of this.
95 acres. So I know where this is going.
He winds up finding some folks to come over and remove some brush from his property on August 31st, 2016. This lady named Kala and a guy named Charles, her boyfriend, are going to come over and take care of some stuff on his property. But wouldn't you know it? They go missing too. Poor Todd. How is he ever going to get all that work done on his 95-acre property? Poor Todd just has the worst luck. Charles starts making posts on Facebook afterwards, too, stuff that really upset his friends and his family. His friends and his family start saying things like, that's not Charles. Someone else is taking control of Charles's Facebook. So things are obviously weird. Something's fishy right now. No one sees Charles or Kala after the day they're supposed to go over to Todd's house. And Charles's Facebook all of a sudden seems like it has someone else posting on it. So some of those folks decide, let's report the 2 of them missing. We don't know where they're at, and we don't think that's actually him posting right now. And the cops start tracing their steps.
Can they track where the posts are coming from?
They can't track where the posts are coming from, but they can track the last place of activity from their cell phones.
Okay.
So they start following these steps, and they realize the last place retracing their steps leads them to is Todd's place. Worst of luck, don't you think? And then the police start to get real fucking suspicious of Todd, that poor dude. Former sex offender, creepy dude, inappropriate far too often. At the time, the police don't even know it, but Todd's just trying to do his duty as a citizen and a customer, and he starts leaving reviews on Amazon to make sure people know the quality of the products that Todd's been purchasing. Like, he posted one, for instance, it's just a knife, and it says, quote, haven't stabbed anyone yet. When I do, it will be with a quality tool like this. Obviously kind of fucked up. He also posted one for a gun grip. He had this extensive firearm collection, was a firm believer in the Second Amendment. He's going to post a review about this gun grip he bought, and it stated, quote, it's blacker than my soul and priced right.
What the what?
Weird, Todd, but that's Todd. And then there's this one that he posted for a high security master padlock, like an upgraded version of the one that I used on our U-Haul to make sure no one got into it. Todd's review read, quote, solid locks, have 5 on a shipping container. Won't stop them, but sure will slow them down till they are too old to care. End quote.
What the?
Seems fucking weird, but that's just Todd, right?
I could barely get into that lock on the trucks. So.
Yeah, and these are like industrial ones, high security. And Todd does indeed own these padlocks and a shipping container. And on November 3rd, 2016, the police are able to confirm that Todd owns those padlocks and that he owns a shipping container when they searched his property and located it. When they were able to cut them off, they discovered Kala Brown, who had been missing at that point for over 2 months inside. She'd been chained up to the inside of the shipping container and kept alive by Todd basically being chained up like a fucking animal. Her boyfriend, Charles, was not to be found in that container. A clue to his whereabouts can be found in another review Todd left for a high-carbon folding shovel. Quote, keep in car for when you have to hide the bodies and you left the full-size shovel at home. Does not come with a midget, which would have been nice.
What the what?
The correct term is little person or dwarf, you fucking asshole. Apparently, Todd didn't care about that, or Charles, Kala's boyfriend, who was found buried nearby. He had been shot to death. Todd is arrested for this. He is taken to jail, and that's when things went from bad to worse in this entire situation.
I actually think there are videos online that you can find of them finding this container and going inside and getting her.
There's definitely videos of them, like, disposing of the container. I saw one of like a forklift that's in this guy's backyard where they're like picking this container up and stuff like that. And then also digging machines on his property. But we're about to get to that because the situation is going from bad to worse. Todd refuses to speak to police initially, but states if they allow him to talk to his mother and give her a photograph, which he wants to do, and then transfer money to a friend's child's college fund, he would give them what they needed and more. And they complied. And when his mother arrived at the police station, he fully admitted to the kidnapping of Kala and the murder of her boyfriend, Charles. He was asked what else was out there on that large property. And he states that the waitress from the Waffle House and her boyfriend had been buried out there as well after Todd shot them to death also.
Jeebus.
So this is an open cold case at this point where, people knew they went missing. Foul play was suspected. They had absolutely no leads. They didn't have any suspects. And he says, these two particular people, I killed them both. And when they're questioning whether or not he's just making shit up because he is a crazy person, like Todd's a fucking lunatic, like maybe he's just making it up and confessing to murders, he details the murders and the way in which he killed them both, which they had not released that information to the public at that point. So
that is so insane.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm jumping ahead. That's part of a confession after they wind up finding the bodies on his property. So it definitely gets worse from there. He basically lured those two people out to his property with the offer of work for cash, which he knew they needed because the two of them had just gotten out of jail and decided that their kid was the most important thing to them. They didn't want their kid to grow up in the foster system. They were going to do whatever it took to get them back, and they needed to get money to get their kid back. He took advantage of that, lured them onto his property, and murdered them both. So let's not forget that multiple murder that had zero progress in the investigation from 2003 that I mentioned, 2 years after Todd was released from jail and 1.5 years after he moved to South Carolina. Turns out Todd was a customer there, of course. He had gone in and purchased a motorcycle from the store and then decided later that he wanted to return it for a full refund in cash. The employees told him no, and he became escalated as customers will do. And then the owner had to deal with him, and he told him that he was not going to get his refund, even though he was demanding it. The owner refused, told him all sales are final. You were told that. There's no refunds. Todd continued to escalate. He said basically he didn't even know how to drive a motorcycle. And then the employee said, if you didn't know how to drive a motorcycle, why would you buy one? And then according to Todd, they laughed at him. And at that point, Todd stormed out. And he decided he was going to go back on a different day, which he did. The day you already know, November 3rd. 2003, snuck in the back, shot the mechanic while he was working to death.
Oh my God.
He then proceeded forward in the lobby, found Beverly, the 52-year-old lady, and he gunned her down in the showroom. Lucas, who was the manager there, he shot as he was in the main doorway, and Scott Ponder, the owner and the son of Beverly, he murdered him in the parking lot. So when asked why, he said it's because they laughed at him and they didn't return his bike.
That guy was so broken.
Because Todd is a fucking monster. And this is the thing. When you hear about people like this, you're like, man, they must have had a really awful childhood. I know lots of people with worse childhoods than Todd. Todd is just a genuine piece of shit. And the police were able to get all this from following the clues from Charles and Kala's disappearance and the last spot their cell phones were active, which was on his property. So they wound up, following the clues, found Kala still alive, talked to Todd, let Todd talk to his mom, and then all this comes out. When he was asked why he murdered Charles, he claimed it was because he had a, quote, really smart mouth. So then they asked Kala, after she had been rescued, exactly what had happened and why she was still alive, basically. And so when she was asked what had happened, she told a more full picture of the story, which obviously trigger warning for what's about to come out here. You can probably guess. Skip ahead about 60 seconds. Like you probably guessed, she was repeatedly sexually assaulted by Todd while she was chained up in there. Charles is in there too. He didn't execute him right away. He took Kala out and he showed her the graves of his other victims to make her not want to escape because he told her he would kill her if she tried to escape. So he was just basically going to keep her chained up there and repeatedly sexual assault her in front of Charles. Apparently, Charles wasn't okay with this. At some point, apparently, he became upset at Kala, and to punish her, he murdered Charles in front of her. And then he buried Charles nearby so that he could show her Charles whenever she was acting unruly, basically.
Wow.
So
yeah, I'm pretty sure in the video where the police come to get her, she doesn't want to leave.
Oh yeah, I guarantee you she was completely terrified and traumatized at that point. It is absolutely horrific, the human being that Todd is. After these confessions, after all this comes out and everyone's just horrified, his mother asks him if there are any other murders he had committed. And his response to her was, "You do not have enough fingers."
Oh my God. He's
been attached to multiple missing person cases and unsolved homicides in Arizona. Over the course of 3 decades of investigations, they're going back into cold cases from as far back as 1983 to 1986, before he was incarcerated at 17. These dates range from the time when Todd was 12 to the time when Todd was 15. They believe he was already sexually assaulting or killing people at that young of an age. There's a bank robbery and a triple homicide that he was also a person of interest in that they had planned to charge him with, but there wasn't enough evidence to hold those charges against him. And let's be real, had he not admitted to the Superbike store killings, he would have gotten away with that shit too. In the end, though, Todd was charged with 7 counts of murder from the 4 folks at the Superbike store, 2 from the Coxies, which is the waitress and her boyfriend that went missing, and 1 for Charles, along with 1 count of kidnapping Kala Brown, sexual misconduct for the way he assaulted Kala Brown, along with some other weapons charges, because guess what? His entire firearms collection was obtained illegally. So he pleaded guilty to every one of those charges as a plea deal to avoid the death penalty.
Wow.
And is serving 7 consecutive life sentences. He has, while in custody, admitted to at least 2 other murders, but has not yet provided details as to who they were or where they took place. And it's funny how if you look some things up, or if you're just sort of like living in the moment when things occur, which is kind of why I don't like to cover true crime until the full picture is like there. The picture that you see that's painted by the media coverage of any specific event can be completely wrong. And if enough time goes by, the conjecture and the blame that gets put out can just become outright sickening. A good example that's not related to this case is when people were looking at Lisa Lam. And they were like, oh, that one guy visited the same hotel as her, and he's clearly a murderer. It had to have been him. And he wound up being there a year before she was ever there and only stayed for 3 days.
Right.
And the internet sleuths absolutely ruined his life, and he tried to kill himself. He did not succeed. He's still alive. Thank God for that. But like that's the sort of thing where it's just like you don't have the full picture. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And some of the things that you say are very damaging to people. Like horribly violent crime winds up being blamed on gang violence, even though there was absolutely no connection. It was repeatedly stated by authorities there's no connection to gang violence. But that's the narrative. And because of that, no one's caught. No evidence exists. And then everyone starts looking in the wrong direction, and fucking Todd got away with it until he admitted to it 13 years after the fact. Or a couple who did a very short stretch in jail for being like con people and tricking someone out of some money are basically written about as these immoral, horrible people, and then they get out of jail and they're just going to act like scumbags and their kid's going to be taken from them because of it. And in reality, the desperation that they had to get money so they could get their kid back, and their way they're going to get money is through hard labor and honest work, is what gets them killed. So the way these people are depicted in the media, or the way these like boogeymen are depicted for like actually committing these terrible crimes when it was someone else entirely, is just a really good example of like how horrific these things can be, and you're just looking in the wrong direction the entire time. And then there's Todd. Todd was the guy who pretended like he was the good guy. From the moment he got to South Carolina, he acted like a creep, bragged about his guns, played the charismatic, charming, good guy that was going to sell you a house and ran this business and had this big property and was giving work to all these different people down on their luck. And he basically played that good guy card until he just couldn't anymore, right up until the moment he was caught red-handed. And when he finally let that facade fall and was showing the monster that everyone who knew him absolutely knew he already was, the floating massive turd that judge called him out for being so long ago, he winds up making a deal at the last minute to avoid being flushed again. And the name, Amazon Review Serial Killer, is what I'm going to call this episode, because that's what some people know it by, and the people that don't know it by it can find it based off of that.
Nice.
But it is annoying to me that, especially in the United States of America, we give these nicknames to these criminals and turn them into something bigger, like these bigger personas, because Todd's not that. He's a monster. He's this tiny little human being that ruined so many lives. That's what he really is. He's Todd the Turd.
Wow.
And he's currently an inmate of Broad River Correctional Institution, and he will be for the rest of his natural fucking life. And when he dies, he has 6 more life sentences to go. God. Or should. I know that's not how life sentences exactly work, but you get my drift. He's also not eligible for parole ever, so at least there's that. And that, my spooky friends, is the story of Todd the Turd.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Nice nickname.
When I was going through, I was just like, this guy is a fucking monster, man. Like, he was just bragging about his shit in these, like, awkward reviews on Amazon, talking to all these people like he was this just great guy while being just obsessed with violence and sexual activity, and was just finding different outlets for it and always taking it out on innocent people. So
I just can't believe that he was able to get his real estate license, start a business, do all that, make a bunch of money after doing the things that he did. Is just crazy to me.
It is very important for people to realize sometimes it is very obvious when people are just lying to your fucking face about who they are. Like when everything screams there's something wrong with a person, but they're the ones telling you everything's okay, that there's nothing wrong with them. But like there's all these red flags. Like, you should probably pay attention to those, because it wound up taking the cops to track the cell phone activity for these people to connect the dots to Todd.
Yeah.
And then once he admitted to this shit, they're like, now we should probably start looking into him. Like, they should have been looking into every fucking bike that was sold by that place and every single person, their whereabouts for all that time. Because I guarantee you Todd didn't have an alibi. And for whatever fucking reason, he just didn't get looked into. He was never a person of interest in that investigation until he admitted it. And then the fucking quote he tells his mother, "You don't have enough fingers," like in reference to counting how many people he's killed.
Right.
That is terrifying. There are people out there with missing people in their lives.
I thought you were going to say missing fingers.
That Todd took from them. No. That Todd took from them that don't know and may never know that it was him that did it. So
yeah. That's just insane. Like how, I don't know if Amazon changed their way they do reviews after this.
I think you can get flagged for leaving an inappropriate review for sure. But like if no one flags it as inappropriate, then people can leave morbid stuff. Of like the 6 or 7 that are attributed to Todd, only like 5 of them have been proven to be him. The other ones came from someone with the same pseudonym around the same time. And a lot of those reviews came like a couple of years before these murders happened. So he was planning to do this shit.
So it's premeditated.
Like the shovel review that he left that was him was 2 years before this happened. So it's like, is it premeditated, or did he write that after he killed someone that they haven't fucking found yet?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so it's just like the more you dig into this one, the worse it gets. So this is the things we know. The good news is he's behind bars for the rest of his life. And if he somehow survives death, which no one can do, he has to do it 6 more times before he gets to go to Arizona to serve another fucking sentence for a crime he was convicted of. So it's just like, the dude was a monster his whole fucking life. And yeah, cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, before we get into Robin's topic, which should be just like super sunshine, I can't wait to hear about it. We're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right, welcome to my other half of this crazy episode. Since Adam was going on true crime vibes this week, I thought I'd hop on the true crime bandwagon. And you know me and true crime. It's always a topic that I can dip my toes in. It's something that I find fascinating. I mean, every day I listen to at least a dash of true crime.
You can palate this a lot more than I can. The more I do research on true crime, like the angrier I get at the fact that they got away with so much stuff.
There are so many, like yesterday I was looking up people that were burned alive because there was one case that I was really interested in looking into. And then I'm like, babe, there are a lot of people that have been burned alive.
I was like, fucking duh. Like, have you heard of the witch trials?
Okay, that's not what I was talking about. But like in contemporary modern times, that is something that is not uncommon. I was just mind blown by how often that happens, which is sad. But
I think in like the earlier part of the 20th century, it was like extremely common as a way of like concealing the identity of victims until people started realizing you can match dental records.
there are a lot of instances where it's just revenge, where someone hates someone else, and so they set them on fire while they're alive.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's crazy, which will be a different topic for a different day. But
everyone's like, I can't wait.
If you guys are here, you are probably in the same boat where you're into knowing a little bit more about this, the human condition and how awful murder is and how often it is, and
the morbidly fascinating human condition.
Yeah. But I wanted to cover a cult today. So it's not one that I've heard a lot about before or at all, really. And it's something that's a little lesser known because we know about the big name cults, right?
Scientology.
I wanted to avoid saying the word Scientology.
I don't think any Scientologists listen to our show.
I highly doubt it.
That said, I'm still quite afraid of them.
But I did want something a little lesser known, and that's how I came across this topic this week, which is the Anthill Kids. And we do really all know the big hitters. Like, we've covered a couple different ones in past episodes. Adam's done like the Charlie Manson cult. I think I was the one that covered Heaven's Gate.
Yep.
We've done a few, and I don't think we've covered Jonestown yet because I think that could be an episode or a number of episodes on its own because it was such a big thing. And that's why I haven't touched it yet, because that's a lot of research and it's a lot of information.
You know what we should do? Because it's January Patreon push, we should put up a poll for our patrons to select our next topic for next week. But we should like commit. We should put up some fucking heavy hitters.
No, I can't.
I have a few that I've been holding off on because there's so much research, and like we should let them pick.
For something like Jonestown,
You'd
would
have to
take
start
me
like tomorrow.
weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
It would take me so long to write a solid episode, just one episode.
You might have to do it multiple parts, like I did the Manson family.
Exactly. But anyway, I think cults are absolutely interesting because I just don't have that mentality where I would join one.
I think that too, but lately I've been like, but doesn't everyone think that until you realize you're in a cult?
Yeah.
Like your phone's a BTS phone. You refuse to upgrade it.
It's called Army, okay?
Wow. Jesus.
No, but it's funny because right now our boss is growing this starter, and he's starting to like give little baby starters to everyone.
And that's a bit different than handing out
Kool-Aid. I'm just like, but it kind of is, right? Where it's like, okay, now you guys make bread. Now you guys make bread. Follow these instructions. That's how you make it.
That's a bread cult. Unless you're like worshiping the bread.
The bread is pretty fucking good. I would worship.
I thought
that
you
bread.
didn't like sourdough. Isn't
it's
it sourdough?
not sour. The loaf that he brought into work, I was like, damn, this bread is good.
Was it sourdough, but it wasn't sour?
Yeah.
That's how lots of sourdough is. You realize
that,
right?
Interesting. Today I learned. But it's I think it's funny, and I'm excited to have my own little yeast starter. But maybe that's me joining this bread cult, and I don't realize I'm falling into
It's just called a hobby. There's a difference between joining a cult and gaining a hobby.
Okay, so some cults like Heaven's Gate have ended in horrible circumstances, and there are others that are just groups of people that have culminated in large numbers believing in one person's teachings, like absolutely fully believing them, undeniably, no matter what they do, that's what they believe. And it's just an overall creepy level of belief, but that's just me. And
it's a creepy level of belief and denial. Again, ignoring red flags that should tell you there's something seriously wrong.
If you're in a cult, that's your belief. You do you, but maybe you should look at yourself and think like, am I in a cult right now?
Just
and is this healthy?
I know that the ladies over at My Favorite Murder talk about this too, but like seriously, there has got to be a method to take a step back and evaluate objectively the decisions of yourself and those around you and who you're being led by and say like, is this a cult? Is this okay? And you should be able to admit to yourself, Probably not. This is probably not cool right now.
All right, so the cult that I wanted to share with you today is the Anthill Kids. It was a cult that was created in 1977 by a man named Roque Thoreau. And when he convinced a group of people to leave their lives behind and join him in this religious movement, I don't think any of them expected what happened to happen. So, did that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just waiting to hear more.
All right, so he was born May 16th, 1947.
He's a Taurus.
In Quebec, Canada, to a Hyacinth and Pierrette Thoreau, a French-Canadian Catholic family. And now, according to the internet, his father was actually a member of an alt-right Catholic group called the White Berets, which just really reminds me of the KKK, but we're not going to go that far. Maybe they weren't that bad, but it was a little bit more extreme than your average Catholic. His father was known to be pretty abusive, though he denies those claims. And it's said that he would have his kids kick each other in the shins as hard as they possibly could until one of them would say stop.
It's pretty fucked
up.
So
it's like teaching these kids to perform violence on other children, and it's just a strange way.
And to tolerate violence like that was somehow a good thing.
I don't know, but Thoreau was considered a really smart kid. Until, I mean, I'm sure that he was still considered a smart kid after he did this, but he dropped out of school when he was 13 years old and just dedicated all his time teaching himself the Old Testament of the Bible. He was just obsessed with that portion of the Bible. From his studies, he determined that the end of the world was inevitable, and it would be brought on by a war of good and evil.
Okay, that second part is definitely Old Testament. The end of the world being inevitable, it's like, fucking duh, bro.
He converted from Catholicism to Seventh-day Adventist, which is different things. I had to ask Adam yesterday.
I was like, it is different.
He began practicing a holistic lifestyle. Like, he started a group there, and it was all about promoting like a life free of unhealthy foods, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, things like that. And he called it the Healthy Living Clinic. He had no medical background, by the way, so for him to call it a clinic makes absolutely no sense. And he certainly wouldn't continue on to live this holistic, drug-free, alcohol-free life.
Usually once they gain followers, they dip right back into those vices they were talking about as being bad things. Like, no, it's okay if I do it.
Yeah, so as he got older, he started taking on this persona of a prophet named Moisey. And he turned his beliefs into this doomsday cult. And he took the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs and added the end of days to it and kind of just took this to another level. And he was so extreme to the point that in 1978, he was actually removed from the Seventh-day Adventist church because they're like, this is not our thing. I don't know what you're doing over there.
It's like how the League of Shadows kicked Bane out. Like, whoa, dude, you're too extreme for us.
Thoreau set up base in Ste. Marie, Quebec, starting a commune using his charisma and personality to lure in those that were lost and insecure, kind of in hopes of creating a place where everyone would be there to listen to what he had to say and believe in what he believed, which is so common in cults, guys. They aim for those down on their luck and don't have anywhere else to go, and it's awful how easily they pull these people in. Watch a bunch of cult documentaries. It's absolutely fascinating. The goal at the start of this group, this religious movement, was to kind of create a place of unity and equality and living lives free of sin. But as with how we hear a lot of these cult stories, things weren't all biscuits and gravy because there's no possible way. You just can't. There were rules, there were limitations. Those residing within the commune were not allowed to remain in contact with any of their families or anyone within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is red flag.
Yeah, and if they're living healthy, they probably didn't even get to eat biscuits and gravy. Clearly red flag.
Like, if you're in a group and they tell you, sorry guys, you can't talk to any of your family anymore, that's done. That part of your life is done. Red flag, get out of there. So doing any of these things, trying to contact your family, any of that would be going against the beliefs of freedom that he preached, which is the opposite of freedom to me. But,
usually people that preach freedom really just want isolation and persecution. So pay attention to that. It's a red flag.
So maybe they saw something that I'm not seeing here, but it just doesn't seem right. According to Thoreau, the end was coming, and not too far off either. So like I said, the cult kind of started in 1977. The end of the world was supposed to be coming around February 1979.
You really got to give yourself a date further out, man. Like, that's too soon.
So as this prophet, right, he's a self-proclaimed prophet. He was like, according to God's warnings, he's told me that the world ending February 1979. Now, I looked through the Wikipedia page for February of 1979, and a lot of stuff did happen that year, that month. A lot of people were born. Lots of people died. A patent for an anti-tumor drug was actually issued that month, which is crazy.
None of this sounds like the end of the world, though.
Right? It's just, it's fascinating. Apparently, this drug is a chemotherapy medication that is still used, and is used to treat a number of different cancers, which I find maybe he was like, seeing this message.
None of this is the end of the world.
So I'm not sure what could have happened. That could be signs that a change in the world was happening, but who knows? There could have been some butterfly that year that happened that would have caused the end of the world, like a linchpin of some sort. Also, if you guys have never watched Butterfly Effect,
I haven't.
What?
Why would I watch that?
Oh my God. Even I've watched it. That movie's so old. Okay. Man, maybe that's one of the movies we have to watch on Scene Missing. We've been going through all these movies that one or the other hasn't watched yet, and it's actually absolutely fascinating which ones we don't.
The movie I've been thinking about recently is Take Me Home Tonight, which is not a very good comedy, but it's just like fucking hilarious because that 90s show came out and I was like, wonder what Topher Grace is up to these days. That's like the last thing I saw.
That 90s show.
Anyways.
All right, so in preparation for this coming apocalypse, he moved the commune to the mountainside in a less populated area.
They isolate them.
Where, according to him, they would be safe from the coming war. So
safe from information from other people letting them know that that's a cult.
Safe from being worldly. Wink.
I fucking hate that word so much.
Yep, and that is one of the things that a lot of quote-unquote cults say to prevent people from finding information.
I don't want to get too deep into my history with cults, but I have spoken to people within cults before and been told I was worldly for pointing out how they were in a cult.
Yeah. So they're in the mountains. They built their town. He called this mountain the Eternal Mountain, but as they started creating this town, this little village, whatever you want to call it, he compared his followers to ants working in an anthill. Thus the name was born, the Anthill Kids.
If you are told you're an ant by someone who's saying that they are a prophet, that is a red flag.
Now, also, yes, because ants are just pretty much slaves for the queen, right?
Exactly.
All right, so now by the 80s, there were only about 40 members. There really aren't that many members of this cult, but it's still a lot of people following the words of a single man. And they all wore identical tunics and lived like with the idea that there's equality within this commune. There obviously is not equality. There's there's equality within the members, but not the leader. There is always
for the ants. Yeah,
there is always that leader. So
they all make 9 cents a day. That's equal.
So the group relocated eventually in 1984 to Burnt River in central Ontario, which is an area that is now part of the city of Kawartha Lakes. So if you live there, hello. But you know what happens with a lot of these doomsday cults is their apocalypse days come and go. And these things don't happen. The world doesn't end. And when this happens, it causes their flock to question if any of it was real.
When I was told I was worldly, it's because I pointed out that the doomsday date had gone and went. And I was told I was worldly for knowing that because you're not allowed to look that up in the cult.
That particular group have like 3 different doomsday dates?
Yep.
Jesus. And those of you out there that know a lot about cults probably know.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
But that kind of began happening with the Anthill Kids. So they started being like, hey, what's going on? This date came and went and we're still here. And Thoreau, he defended himself by arguing that time on earth and time to God were on different planes and therefore must have caused a miscalculation. Somehow, people still followed him despite this. I don't understand it, but they did.
There's a certain type of person who looks for a purpose to come externally, and they desperately need to latch on to a cause, and they follow these folks, and they will follow them literally off a cliff like a lemming. And it's really scary to think about how someone who is charismatic and crazy can find those people and then get them to follow them, because it's absolutely terrifying, and it's super, super dangerous.
And when something like this happens where people start questioning the authority of that leader always starts spiraling out of control.
Yep.
So he begins to marry and impregnate numerous women within this commune because he wants to grow the numbers of his followers. Yeah. So he's growing the community's numbers, and somehow by doing so, he's growing the faith and the devotion. He fathers 20 children.
Oh my God.
With 9 different members. He is becoming more and more like those cult leaders you hear about that abuse their power. And no word could be said against his own. He was growing into an alcoholic, so he started drinking more and more. He would have increasingly erratic, drunken behavior. He would start putting forth ridiculous rules that are said to be, he was like, this is part of our belief, but they were absolutely irrational. So members could not have sex with each other without his permission. Circle back to how he was now the one that was responsible for procreating. They couldn't talk to each other unless he permitted it. He would punish those that he thought would be straying from the group. So he would actually spy on them. Mm-hmm. And if he felt like they were straying from the group, he would punish them. And then he would say that God told him what they had done.
Lots of organizations that are cults that are bigger, that have an organized society like this, place spies in your life so that people in positions of power can seem omnipotent in some way.
Yes.
By knowing the things that are happening. And the people who are spies are told they're basically doing God's work by doing that.
Right. And it certainly gives me vibes for other cults that may or may not exist today. But it's definitely twisted. And so if somebody wanted to leave, he would beat them. He would hit them with a belt or a hammer. What
is it with these guys and hammers in this episode?
I don't know, man. It's all about the construction. I thought
you were going to go with a hammer time joke.
Oh, man, no. That would have been way
Swing
better.
and a miss.
As their main income was selling baked goods, making crafts, maple syrup, stuff like that.
Man, did you hear about that fucking cult? That dude is crazy, but they make the best maple syrup on the planet.
I sent you a picture of the group, like a group picture of a few members in front of the sign that says like Anthill Kids, and it's like crafts or something. I'm sure it was like their shop that they set up to sell their goods. But if you didn't bring in enough money, you'd also be punished. Sometimes he'd even have people suspended from the ceiling and then pluck each of their body hairs out one by one.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. One of the most gross things that I read was that he'd even defecate on them, which is fucking ew.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it, I'm like, gross.
I would have been kicked out of that cult if they tried to pull out all my hairs, because he would have seen all the body hair and been like, never mind. This will take too long.
The members of the Anthill Kids didn't even question his actions or judgments. Despite the mental and physical abuse, that was their leader. Who were they to question their messiah, right? So things kept escalating. They just followed everything that he was telling them. Things kept getting worse. He kept getting more violent, more dangerous. His tools of punishment went from hammers to sledgehammers, much larger hammers. He would force...
I like that you defined sledgehammer. Did anyone out there not know what a sledgehammer was?
You know what?
Besides that song, Sledgehammer.
He would force members to break their own legs with them.
Fucking what is wrong with these people, man?
So he would have members break their own legs, burn themselves. He would have them shoot each other in the shoulders. I don't know what his kink with poop was, but he would have them eat it.
Ew.
Yeah, fucking ew. Okay.
You did tell me this was going to get gross.
Yeah. He would constantly test the loyalty of his followers, forcing them to do things like cut each other's toes off. This guy was absolutely brutal. And it comes down to his need to get that validation, to have someone tell him, like, you are our leader, we trust you implicitly. And by forcing them to do this, he's like, yes, they still follow me. You know, he's too afraid of letting these people go. And so he wants to test them constantly and make sure they're still with him. But that's not even the worst part.
Oh, no.
He would torture the children.
Oh, my God.
So the children would be, you know, physically, sexually abused. He would facilitate peer torture. So, like he experienced when he was a child with the children kicking each other, he would have kids stone other kids.
Jesus.
It was absolutely awful. One of his wives actually left a newborn out in the cold, supposedly, in order to keep it away from the abuse. It died because it was left out in the cold.
She was trying to spare it from the world it was going to be brought into.
I mean, it seems counterintuitive, but yes. These punishment sessions were his way of quote unquote purifying members. It was like a type of baptism in his belief. And one of his beliefs was that in order to have a pain-free afterlife, one would have to suffer greatly while alive, which is absolutely insane.
That's some Da Vinci Code shit, like that dude,
who whips himself?
Self-flagellating or whatever you call it. Like
self-flagellation, yeah.
Yeah, that's just fucking horrific.
So his delusion of being this messiah just kept growing. He claimed that he was a holy, powerful being with healing powers. So he would perform these surgical operations.
Oh my God.
Absolutely unnecessary. It's like something from freaking A Million Ways to Die in the West, where it's like just stuff that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, they are cutting off their toes. That is toe foot, if I've ever heard of it.
So his little operations would include the injection of 90% ethanol into stomachs if this person would be experiencing nausea.
Oh my God.
Or he would perform amateur circumcisions on both children and adults. One of these botched circumcisions actually led to the death of a child. In 1987, approximately 14 or so children were removed from the commune based on reports of abuse.
Thank God.
Some sources say it was because of the death of the child that was left out to die in the cold that they came and were like, dude, what the fuck is up with this? The children were then placed in foster homes. I'm wondering, like, how many of them, you know, grew up knowing, like, man, my father is this messed up, you know, human being.
It's so crazy to think about that, too. It didn't occur to me that if they want to know who their father was, it's like, it's that dude.
Therault faced no consequences despite the sheer amount of abuse of these children, which is crazy to me. In 1989, one of his followers, Solange Ballard, was complaining of an upset stomach. So this is something that I'm going to definitely put a trigger warning in front of because he is disgusting and awful and horrible.
How far ahead should people jump?
I would say like maybe a minute and a half. There's a lot that goes on here. Maybe like 4 minutes, dude. It's because it's a
pretty big gap right there.
So his answer to her upset stomach was to lay her naked on a table, no anesthesia, and he just punched her in the stomach. And then he forced a crude enema using molasses and olive oil. Fucking ew. And then he went on to open up her abdomen and rip off a part of her intestines with his bare hands.
Oh my God.
Another member was then forced to stitch her up with a needle and thread. She obviously died the next day. It was absolutely freaking horrific. And this guy was probably drunk off his ass. He was probably drunk off booze and power and whatever insanity he had going on. If I were to somehow have found myself in a cult like this at some point, at this point in the story, if I were freaking dying of pain, I would never admit it. Like, seeing him kill someone in front of me would just, like, I'd be like, I have a headache. Nope, I'm good. If I have a migraine, I'm sitting here working. I'm working through the pain.
I sincerely don't think I could ever get to a point where, as soon as someone was like, start abusing yourselves, I'd be like, how about I beat the shit out of you? Like, if you're a healer, show me how you're going to prevent me from beating the shit out of you, and then heal yourself.
But then all the members.
That's fine. They can fuck me up, but like, I would rather do that than hurt myself to appease this fucking turd nugget.
It's just, this guy was crazy. And it didn't just end there. So he claimed he could resurrect her.
Oh my God.
So he bored a hole into her skull, and they did.
Oh, we're done.
Yeah, they did some disgusting stuff. And obviously she did not come back to life. She was
What? No way.
She was buried a short distance from the commune. He actually wore one of her ribs in a leather case around his neck afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah. A member named Gabrielle Lavallee experienced horrific treatment herself. So she suffered abuse in the name of his amateur surgeries. She had 8 of her teeth forcibly removed after complaining of a toothache. In 1989, she had like a stiff hand, stiff pinky, something like that. So he decided to amputate her entire arm.
Oh my God.
With a meat cleaver.
What the fuck, dude? This is like a bad movie I wouldn't watch.
Yeah. It's like something from, like, what is it? The Human Centipede or something.
This is just awful.
He believed the wound to have grown gangrenous, so he decided to cut parts off of it with scissors, like a freaking monster, and actually removed pieces of, like, breast tissue and stuff with it. He beat her with the blunt end of an axe and then left her in a bush. So when she woke up, she did manage to escape.
How in the fuck is she
get
still
help,
alive?
Right? When authorities got involved, that was the end of the Anthill kids. So it took 6 weeks until they were able to bring him in. They had actually long been suspicious of the commune. Obviously, they freaking took 14 or so kids from there. But they couldn't investigate it due to the cult being officially registered as a church.
Of course.
So because it was registered as a church, they couldn't investigate the adults. They couldn't do much with the adults because they could be there willingly, you know what I mean? But they did save the children that they could. After investigating the assault allegations and reports, Thoreau was found guilty of Gabrielle's forced amputation and sentenced to 12 years in prison. So further investigation into the organization after all this exposed that murder of Solange, that woman who he freaking absolutely obliterated. And in 1993, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. So they also discovered bodies of children that had died on in the commune. And though a lot of followers abandoned the cause after his first arrest, he still fathered an additional 4 children afterwards.
Wow.
Through conjugal visits with some of the remaining female members, which is freaking insane to me. When reporters attempted to get a statement from his father, all his father had to say was this, quote, I don't want to talk about him or hear his name. I raised 7 children and only one of them turned out like that. End
wow.
quote.
That's fucking terrifying.
Yeah. In 2002, he was rejected for parole as he was considered too high risk to offend again. And after that, he never reapplied for parole. He attempted to sell some of his artwork and poetry, but the Correctional Service of Canada prevented it.
Good.
He died on February 26, 2011. He was found dead near his cell, said to be the result of an altercation with his cellmate, who was a 60-year-old convicted murderer by the name of Matthew Gerard McDonald. He pled guilty and added another life sentence.
He's like, put it on my tab.
Yeah, he added another life sentence to his already existing life sentence. He had shivved him in the neck and then walked over to the guard station, handed over the weapon, and said, quote, that piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up, end quote.
Wow.
And that is the end of this guy.
I didn't think you could make me be happy about a murder, But you kind of did, because this guy was fucking awful, dude. Like, when I read about Todd being in jail still and all the things that Todd had done on my topic, I was like, I kind of hope people know who he is, because as soon as it comes out that he was a sexual predator, it's likely he'll be killed in jail, which is a horrible thing to hope for. But the fact that he avoided the death penalty for me, you know, when he did all those horrible things, is something that bothered me. And then you go through the moral like implications in your head of like, is that a right thing to hope for? But when you listen to this sort of story, when it ends with like, you know, jailhouse justice, some dude fucking shivved him and killed him because even they realized this dude was a massive piece of shit. It's just like, it is somewhat of a relief to just know that he's no longer in this world, even if it was in such a horrific way.
Yeah.
Because that story is fucking brutal.
Yeah, I had never really heard of this cult before. So when I read all that, I was like, he freaking he cut someone's arm off. It's insane.
With a fucking cleaver.
It's
like,
insane.
It is crazy how people will stick around for stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely insane that it was like, just fucking leave. Just say like, this is it. Like the meat cleaver thing was too much for me. A million things before that should have been too much for them. Like, as soon as it started getting weird,
like when he was forcing people to abuse themselves, I'm like, nah, I'm out.
As soon as he'd have been like, you need my permission to talk to someone, I'd been like, I talk a lot. I don't know about that. Like, I have a podcast. I don't think that's going to work, my dude. And that's just, I mean, so many red flags obviously ignored, but like, how fucking blood red can those flags get?
Yeah.
So, and people still visited him and still fucked him when he was in jail.
Oh my God. So like vulgar, but yes, accurate. It's, if you've made it to this far in the episode, congratulations.
Give yourself a gold star.
Yeah, because that's a lot you've just listened to and have gone through. Thank you for listening to us this far. Hopefully you found those topics interesting. We're the Scaryish podcast. We're here to traumatize you, I guess.
I think I understand, like, everyone in this group of people that listen to this show and shows like this has this like morbid fascination with true crime and horrible things that happen. But some of them are like gut wrenching and like stomach turning. Like, there was multiple points in your story where I was just like, la 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 la, like in my head, like, holy shit, that is awful. Give me a good cryptid any day. So
oh yeah cryptids
brutal stuff. But either way, very well researched topic. I think we had a couple of good topics this episode for any of you that are morbidly curious. So hopefully you enjoyed them as much as you can enjoy topics like that. Right on. So if you have any stories you would like to share with us, hopefully it doesn't have to be about any of the things we talked about today. It could be supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, true crime, extraterrestrial. Feel free to reach out to us by emailing storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, click on contact us, fill out that form, and it does come directly to us. And we would love to hear from you. We do occasionally have these episodes called Storytime, where we read the stories sent to us. We call those your little homegrown horrors. So send them our way, and we'd be more than happy to read it. And make sure you let us know that we have permission to read it on the show. For those folks who would like to donate to us, I already mentioned at the beginning of the show when I talked about January Patreon push, but Robin, why don't you let folks know the options they have to donate?
So you can go to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast, and those are our monthly donations with tiers starting at $1. I am just about finished wrapping up all of the Badge of Honor patron tiers and above. And I'll definitely put stamps on them before Adam sends them out.
I will never send them out ever again.
But yeah, and then if you're not into the monthly tier type thing, you can also go to ko-fi.com/Scaryish podcast, and those are one-time donations, and all your donations really just help us keep the show going, and just give us a little bit extra support when we need it, paying all these extra fees. So we're thankful for everybody who's shared us with their friends, family.
Maybe not share this episode. Give them one of the softer episodes first before you give them this one.
But we're very thankful for all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the support we get. You folks are amazing, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. And that is everything we have for episode 255. This is definitely getting fucking demonetized, I will tell you that. But that said, Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.